Ooh, that made me dizzy. I don't think I knew it was going to spin like that. Are there questions? This ends the formal presentation.
We buried them.
We were just so thorough. That must be what it is. And it's cold and rainy and Friday. Thoughts or comments? Yeah.
This might be a difficult question to answer.
And thank you for asking. We'll give it to you.
But at what age do you recommend people start thinking about employment and working towards that goal? I mean, obviously that's a lifelong thing.
Preschool.
But, you know, a lot of professionals that work with people with disabilities are not thinking that way from the get-go. So when we say you get an OBR job specialist involved, what age? I mean, personally, I think if you wait till they're 18 or 19, you're waiting too long.
Ideally, I'd like to be invited into preschools.
Yeah.
I mean, really, so that that expectation is set. Because when you talk to people who do the work, they'll say it's a lot easier when the expectation has been there since they were a kid that they're going to go to work.
It should really be no different than it would be for a non-disabled child.
Now, the service part does have ages because of funding streams and how different systems work. VR will enter, you can have a case 2 years before you exit high school. There's a community-based workforce transition program that starts earlier in school. Schools should have transition plans. But you're right, you have to start thinking really early to make sure that employment is a part of that and that it gets as a goal and that it stays as one. So I'd want to bring them in as early as you can. Schools all function as that school functions. I think some are really good about inviting folks from VR and other agencies in before students exit high school, and some don't do that as much. I don't know why, and the person in the room I would have pointed to seemed to have skipped out briefly. But I would want it on the table as early as possible, because the sooner that's an expectation in someone's life, the easier it's going to be.
The families that I know in Kentucky for whom employment has always been an expectation, regardless of the disability of their child, those folks are employed very gainfully.
I mean, it makes sense that it's easier to figure out employment for someone coming out of high school who's always had this expectation than for someone who's 45 and never had the expectation and has been in a day program for 25 years. It's possible for both.
And it does happen for both, very successfully.
Well, and I'm sorry, I'm just brainstorming. But are high school resource teachers trained to have that expectation?
I'm not a high school resource teacher, so I don't know.
Right, but in your experience,
From what I hear, it sounds like maybe no, or if I provide training. I talk a lot, and I like to think that people that come to my trainings eat up every word that I say and remember it and then go forth and do good things. And in the reality, that is not the case, much
Yeah,
to
and
blow
I'm sorry,
to our
it's not
egos.
really- it's not really pointed
So
to
whether
you.
they have that training or whether they just get so bogged down in the day-to-day, I don't know. We're our school people. But it isn't as high a priority in every school as I'd like to see it.
That's
Or as
very
it should
true.
be.
And the sad thing is that statistics tell us if a child works while they're in high school, they're going to work after high school. So, and if we're ever going to have the kind of impact on employment for people with disabilities we need to start earlier and earlier. I believe that in most schools the plan is for employment services to start around 16, I believe. Very often they don't get around to it until much later. It ought to be, is it 14 now? Very often they don't seem to get around to it until later, if at all. And I think that's something that's got to change. And I believe in all honesty, I believe that there's a desire for that to change in most places.
The WIO Act is mandated.
It is mandated.
Yeah.
Changes.
But then again, We have other mandates too.
But another aspect of it too is like, even if you start to think about employment, we'll say at 14, unless the soft skills and other aspects that are critical to employment are put into place first and properly developed, it doesn't matter if you start working on them at 14. The kid's not going to get there in time for employment to genuinely happen. Those aspects to a IEP have to be in place extremely early as one of the main focuses of, like, the main focus of non-academics. You know, it has to be included simply because in the end, a school functions to provide training for a kid to be able to work and function in daily life when they leave. So it's not like the school can say, well, it's not academic, we don't do that. Yeah, that's one of the things that has to be in place in order for the transition plan to actually have a shot at working.
Yeah, and I think the example that Katie gave is pretty relevant here too. Oftentimes the work experiences that are provided tend to leave the person associating work with something that's negative, because the work experiences tend not to be personalized to that person. They tend to be what's available for everyone. So.
I'm a parent, so I'm just wondering what your all's experience has been based on what I've seen. So I realize it's not really a question, I'm just trying to.
That's a great question.
Have high expectations.
Yeah.
And individualizing is critical.
Yeah.
Because it's going to look different. You're looking for different things for each person. So the idea of just having the 5 places that the school job coach knows about and rotating people through it, you might get lucky and somebody likes what they do, but you might not, and then you're going to see more behaviors or problems, and then people learn that either they learn they don't want to go to work, or other people learn that they can't work. And not being able to work in an entry-level service sector job is not at all the same as not being able to work.
Honestly, Dr. Kleiner would know better than I do, but all of our, or Dr. Lobianco, but all the post-school outcomes, Tracy, show that students also go involved in extracurricular activities. In other words, there are lots of things that help people to develop, whether it's relationships or skills or get to know themselves, that could lead to increased possibilities of employment. Does that make sense? I mean, that they have those life experiences when they're younger.
Yeah.
Same experiences
All
all
those are
students
good.
are
I'm
having.
just not sure that, but I guess what I'm not really asking, I don't know what I'm doing. But what's the buy-in with schools? And I'm just wondering if my experience can that be generalized, or am I missing something?
From what I've heard, some schools are really good, some are horrific. To be quite honest, there's no other way to put it. Like, I moved down to Alabama, and the local school there is beyond terrible, but, and that's not even, like, that's an understatement. But a lot of others in the same area are very good. So, it's sort of hit and miss.
We can talk more about it.
I think that's where there's a kind of shift in the education system that's kind of happening to be more inclusive. But I think on the long run, we also have to be able to look at the education system and what are those expectations? Because if a child is placed in the special education classes, those expectations are very different than what the expectations are in the mainstream class. And the outcomes are 2 completely different things. So if a child's been in classes for 21 years and then they're not going to graduate with an actual diploma, then they're not going to have that expectation or that self-worth to say, I want to be able to work and I want to be able to, function. And it goes back to what she was also saying too, that, research shows that, kids and adults who are active in, leisure activities and have an active social life, are often much more satisfied in life and have the skills to become employed in a job where they're not underemployed, that they are being able to do what they want to do with their lives.
And I think it's important to keep that presumption of employability, that whether you graduate with a diploma or an alternate diploma, that there are options after high school. There's options for employment, there's options for education. You can be a part of a CTP program at a university without a high school diploma. And the SHEP program can support students who have alternate diplomas in going to college and getting some education that can offer them the hope of a better job when they finish that the expectations are important, but lots of things can be figured out when people really thoughtfully think about it.
I think with the 2004 regulation, the IDEA regulations, that there's dialogue in the IEP, but until you start actually adding outcomes to that, because basically what schools are doing now is they're making sure that the appropriate language is a part of the child or the youth's plan. But when you have no responsibility for the actual outcome of those things, then you just kind of say, well, we'll just take care of it until time runs out.
You see that in adult services as well.
Yeah.
The discussion, but not the outcome.
No outcome.
But with the WOA,
WOA.
WOA.
Yeah.
They're gonna, WOA,
Yeah.
where they're pulling that 15% and putting that towards the schools, maybe that'll cause there to be some more crossover and overlap of dialogue.
That's the intent.
Yeah, and I think that with adult services, what we're doing is that now we have expectations of results and of excellence, and folks actually doing the things that are in their plan. And the more we can transition to that kind of reality, clearly the better off we are. So.
And can we just say that your brother-in-law did not get his job by knowing anybody?
No, he didn't.
He wasn't he hired before your wife was hired?
He was.
Yeah.
He was.
So
and
he was hired before his sister. Who's
Yeah.
married to Jeff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conversation about who you know.
That
That's
wasn't.
not the case in
That was
Jeff's.
not what happened there. But I have to tell you that we just moved offices, and David had been our receptionist for about 10 years in the morning. And guess what? In our new setup, we really don't need a receptionist. It's just as Katie was talking about, jobs change. So as a group, we got together and we started thinking about, what can David do that will free other folks up to do other things. And he now has an entirely new list of job duties that he's learning to do and doing quite well with that take the heat off of many other folks in the office. So again, you always have to be conscious to the need for job development as things move forward. As things do change. And I must say, there was never any thought about eliminating his job. Not for the first second. And I don't think that had anything to do with the fact that I work there or Susan works there. Because there are tasks that need to be done that he can do that free up a significant amount of time for other people. So that's the way to look at it.
Do voc rehab counselors have to go to schools if
Wrong people to be asking.
I would like to not answer that question.
No, don't answer the question, that's fine.
I think there is an expectation with WIOA that happen, but I don't know that they figured out exactly how that can happen.
Or did it
From
have
a-
to be at the school, or if it could be elsewhere?
School actually has to extend the invitation.
Yeah, I don't know
Right.
that a counselor can force their way into a school.
Well, I know that
Well, I know they can't do that.
Well,
I know
But that they
typically OBR
aren't
counselor,
mandated to
OBR
be there.
offices now have a counselor specifically
Right.
for the transition age. And I think
Some
that
do. I
some
don't
do,
know
not
that all
all,
do.
But
Yeah, they're moving toward that.
I think it's moving towards that way, has been my understanding. But
Well, I don't think they're liar too, as in like, they'll lose their jobs if they don't, although in my opinion, unless they're like in the hospital, they should. Because the OBR office where I live now, I think a bomb needs to go off on it. One of the things that makes me feel that way, of course, is that all of the OBR counselors, essentially, they're invited to IEP meetings with the kids and transition meetings and all of that. Of course, they don't ever show up, even though they were expected to. And the kid is actually on, the OBR's case rolls because they're that old enough for it. And so it's not mandated where they'll lose their job if they don't show up. It should be.
I think it goes back to kind of good old fashioned having good relationships and communication. And in some places have better relationships than others. And I don't know if some have bad relationships or some just haven't created those. But again, us working together, whether it's the VR counselor in the school system or the VR counselor and the case manager. I mean, I know the VR system and the waiver system are two very different systems that didn't have a lot to do with each other for a long time, and people have worked really hard to get to know each other and to understand the language and to have relationships. And ABSI has spent a lot of time getting VR counselors and employment specialists and case managers together so that they understand each other's roles and what goes on. And I think the same kind of thing probably needs to happen with the school system too. If we can get
and that
who those
is-
people are,
that is
but
beginning to
that
happen.
helps tremendously when they just
Yeah.
get to know each other and understand you're not trying to make my job harder. I think we need to keep getting that message out too. Any other questions?
5 minutes.
How do you think employment firms will actually look at this state considering the whole money issue with it?
Well, I think that if we're able to make the kind of economic arguments that are out there, I think that we stand a really good chance of getting something meaningful in place. Because again, effective employment services will provide a net return to society. And there's no question.
When it comes to politicians, that doesn't always mean much because you're like, well, we have no money now.
Yeah. All we need is a crack in the door.
Later.
Yeah. All we need is a crack in the door, and then we'll start pushing and see what happens.
Carolyn.
Jeff, in the beginning of your presentation, you showed a slide very, very early on about the potential I waivers.
That's
Can
at
you
the very
say a
end.
little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's actually a change in the rules from CMS that allow waiver programs to work across disability groups. See, in the past, waivers had to be specific to a disability. So now what we do have the ability to do is to have a service-only waiver. So we could establish an employment services I waiver that would include employment services, benefits analyses, and things of that nature to help folks go to work.
So instead of a waiver that is based like the acquired brain injury waiver or the SEL, which is based upon a population, here's all the services. This would be a waiver that was based upon the service
Across all
and
disabilities.
and then anybody who met the
Yes.
Criteria.
Yes, anybody that meets the criteria. And the key is we have to develop the criteria in a fashion that assures that it's not extended beyond that population that actually needs the service.
Are we considering?
Oh, yes. It's a tough sell right now, clearly. I mean, a lot has been going on with Medicaid, whether you like it or not. Between managed care and expanded Medicaid and everything else that's been happening, they have been pretty busy. And, when you talk about I waivers, the other possibility is that we could end up with a supported employment I waiver through managed care, which would be an entirely different animal that I'm not sure exactly how we would manage. So, well, I don't necessarily want it either. So there are all kinds of different possibilities out there, and the thing we need to do is make sure that we do this very thoughtfully and garner the kind of support that we need to be successful with it in the long term. Because the last thing we want to do is to attempt to do something that we're ill prepared to do and fail.
Other states that have tried an I waiver and supported employment?
Delaware has just gotten approval for an employment I waiver, and that shouldn't surprise anyone. Their governor was one of the biggest advocates for employment services for people with disabilities in the country. So we're watching what's going on very closely, what's going on in Delaware, and trying to model. I actually have a copy of I've had a copy of their waiver since it was submitted, and we're looking very carefully at that. Again, it has to be done quite thoughtfully. It's not something that can be done in a haphazard fashion.
What department would be over it?
Well, all waivers are run through Medicaid services. They would simply contract out with someone else, and whom they would contract out with would be their choice. Although it would make a lot of sense for it to be OVR.
Is there any guess on a time frame for that?
Oh, no.
10 years, tomorrow, 40 years?
10 years, they'll probably be doing something else. So I would say 10 years
Shoot
is way
for
too
10
far.
and you might be okay.
Yeah.
You might be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I think that, we have some changes likely coming here in Kentucky in the next few years, and I think that we have to work through those changes and see. But clearly, I think that we'll have an argument ready within the next year to year and a half. Whether we have the opportunity to make that argument yet remains to be seen.
And there are a large number of people who receive support employment services that do not have a waiver. I think
That's the key reason.
the lack
for it.
of long-term support funds, it makes it difficult, and agencies have to have other ways then to pay for, to provide that support. But it certainly isn't out of the
That
question
was my
for other
question.
people.
Working with families, if the family doesn't have waiver services, how do they do that? How do we find them?
That's the reason for doing the I waiver, because it would expand
But
services
until
beyond the
then,
existing
is there a
waiver.
possibility?
There has been some state general fund dollars that have been able to pay for it. Some agencies have private donations. There's a couple counties that have county tax dollars that are allocated to an agency to provide that. It's really individual up to where you happen to be and what agency. Some subsidize it by other parts of their organization. Some send a postcard once a year that say, "Call me if you need me." I mean, there's
Okay.
different ways.
Yeah, there's a wide variety, but Kay makes a
But
good
it
point.
isn't
There are
unheard of.
there are some state general funds that are available, and the CompCares can make application for those funds for employments if they should choose to do so. I know of one large CompCare that has requested a lot of assistance with employment, and they've received some. So again, it's a matter of, the entire system is changing right now, and it's a matter of the CompCare systems identifying the need and requesting assistance now.
So the I-waiver will be for long-term support, or would it be for the entire process?
It'd be for the entire process if the use of VR funding has already been expended.
You have to start with VR
Yeah.
because
By
then you
law,
pay
you
for
have
it.
to start with Rehab
And
Act funding.
Medicaid's the payer of last resort.
If rehab funding has been used, then it's available through the waiver. All aspects are available through the waiver.
So essentially, someone would come in, they would start getting supported employment, but while they're doing that, they would also apply for this, considering normally it takes 50 eons, it seems like, for these sorts of things, like waivers to actually go through the paperwork and all of that, or like that part of it would happen simultaneously, so that way after 90, was it 120? I forgot how many months VR pays, but then once,
If someone already
VR is
has the
outcome
waiver,
based.
once VR has paid that fund, then they could
Yeah.
switch over to those. If they don't have a waiver yet, that would be another conversation.
Well, yeah.
But we are now at 3:02, so can we finish that answer
yeah.
in just a minute?
It's almost time's up, so you need to finalize anything you need to say. I'm timekeeper.
That's what I just said.
Oh, you did?
I did.
I don't listen, I just come in
This
here
is
and
why
make
you
sure
direct
everybody does
all
what
of your
I did.
school questions to her.
Yeah.
She has returned to the room. Now I'll put
Yes.
her on the spot. Give her your school questions.
I'll stick around.
Thank you all very much. Enjoy your weekends.
I think Mita needs a room.
Yes. Oh, please fill out your evaluation. I shouldn't tell you to say great things, but be honest, and there's a box by the exit door for them.